Touch is not mechanical, it's not a checklist, it's an art. It begins long before your hands arrive at her chest. It begins in your gaze, in the tone of your voice, in the way you make her feel seen before she is ever touched. A woman's breasts are not simply erogenous zones. They are emotional landscapes, they carry her history. Maybe the first time she felt desired. Maybe the first time she felt shame. Maybe a moment when she felt powerful. Maybe a time she felt vulnerable. So when you touch her, you're not just reaching for pleasure, you're entering a sacred story. Don't rush it. Don't grope like you're entitled. Tease like you're invited. Begin with breath. Let your eyes follow the curve of her body like they're hungry for her, not just for her body. Touch the outside of her chest, her collarbone, her shoulder, the sides of her ribs, and let her feel anticipation building, not pressure forcing. When your hands do meet her breasts, let them listen, let them ask questions without words. Use your fingers to explore, not conquer. Let your palms rest as if they're absorbing her energy. Circle, glide, press. But let her response guide you. She will tell you everything in her breath, in her arch, in her sound, when she sighs, when her skin warms under your touch, when she leans into you. That's when you know you're not just turning her on, you're turning her open. Because real arousal is not about harder or faster. It's about deeper, it's about making her feel like you're not just touching her breasts, you're touching her soul. And when she feels that, that's when she goes wild. Not because you took her body, but because you held her essence. Presence over performance is the cornerstone of truly erotic touch, especially when it comes to a woman's breasts. Because what arouses her most deeply is not the perfection of a man's technique, but the quality of his attention. When you're present, fully grounded in the moment with her, your hands become more than hands, they become instruments of connection, curiosity, and reverence. Women can sense when your touch is distracted, robotic, or performative, and nothing turns desire off more quickly than being treated like an object or a routine. Presence is about emotional attunement, about reading her body like a living, breathing response to your energy. It's about listening with your fingertips and feeling her reactions with your heart. You can know every technique in the world, but if you touch her like you're somewhere else, thinking about the next move, the end goal, or even your own performance anxiety, she'll feel it. And it will pull her out of her body and into her head, where desire dims. But when you slow down, breathe with her, and truly see her, your hands start to speak a different language. Your touch becomes an inquiry, not a declaration. You explore her without assuming you know what will work. You adjust based on the subtle shifts in her breath, the way her skin responds, the way her body either melts or tightens. This kind of presence builds trust. It makes her feel safe to let go, to be seen, to be vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, in that co-created space where she isn't being performed on but rather explored with, arousal grows. It becomes a mutual dance instead of a one-sided act. She starts to feel cherished instead of used, desired instead of assessed. Presence transforms your hands into something sacred, because they are no longer operating from a place of doing, but from a place of being. And it is in that being, with her, for her, because of her, that real erotic energy is born. Erotic energy begins long before your hands ever reach her breasts, because true arousal is rooted in anticipation, emotional connection, and the psychological space you create for her to feel desired. A woman's body opens in response to how she's made to feel, not just how she's touched. And this begins with the invisible thread of desire you weave through your presence, your words, and your gaze. The way you look at her when she walks into the room, the tone of your voice when you say her name, the subtle but intentional way you lean in when she speaks. All of this awakens her sensuality far more than an unexpected grab or rushed touch ever could. When she feels emotionally safe, emotionally admired, and emotionally wanted, her body begins to respond before you even get close to it. This is where seduction lives, not in the physical contact itself, but in the energetic lead up to it. It's in the compliment that doesn't sound rehearsed, in the glance that lingers just a second longer, in the presence you bring to the conversation, in the patience you show with her responses. This emotional foreplay tells her you're not just touching her body, you're reaching for her essence. She starts to feel seen, not just looked at, which awakens her in a deeper and more enduring way. If your energy is scattered or transactional, if you approach her body with entitlement or pressure, she'll instinctively pull back, because it won't feel safe, sensual, or connected. But if your energy is slow, intentional, and curious, she will lean into you, physically and emotionally. You're not just building sexual arousal, you're cultivating a psychological atmosphere that allows her to surrender. She wants to feel like she is the only woman in the world at that moment, and your ability to create that feeling with your attention is what activates her desire. Erotic energy is not about trying harder, it's about tuning in deeper. It's about recognizing that everything you do before you touch her matters just as much, if not more, than what you do with your hands. Because when she feels emotionally turned on, her body becomes a willing and eager extension of that desire. Her skin becomes more sensitive, her breath more shallow, her energy more alive. She begins to crave the moment your hand meets her breast, not because it's expected, but because everything in her has already been awakened. You've lit the fire not with pressure, but with presence. You've seduced her not with moves, but with meaning. And by the time your touch arrives, it's no longer about the action. It's about the journey you've taken her on just to get there. The breasts are not switches to be flipped, but stories to be read, held, and understood. Because a woman's relationship with her chest is often deeply layered with memory, emotion, and meaning that stretch far beyond mere physical stimulation. From the earliest stages of her development, her breasts may have been sources of curiosity, shame, attention, discomfort, pride, or vulnerability, and every experience she's had, whether she was sexualized too early, criticized for her appearance, praised in objectifying ways, or made to feel beautiful and whole, lives somewhere within that part of her body. When you touch her breasts, you're not simply activating nerve endings, you're engaging with something that has been looked at, judged, desired, hidden, exposed, and internalized in complex ways. Her emotional safety determines how freely she can surrender to that touch. If you rush in with the mindset that breasts are just a shortcut to arousal, you're missing the opportunity to truly meet her where she lives. She may have learned to disconnect from her chest or to protect herself from being reduced to it. And so what seems like a simple caress can feel invasive if done without presence and respect. But when you approach her with reverence, with a desire to understand her as a full human being, your hands stop being mechanical and start becoming attuned. You notice the way her breath shifts, the way she tenses or softens, the way her eyes either close in surrender or stay open in watchfulness. You realize her chest is not a place to rush to, but a destination you earn access to through emotional intimacy and attuned curiosity. Every touch becomes a question. Do you trust me here? Do you feel safe here? Do you feel cherished or claimed? And she answers not in words, but in how her body responds. Maybe she arches into you, maybe she pulls away, maybe she whispers breathless approval without saying a thing. That's the story you're listening for, not just how to stimulate her, but how to awaken her, how to make her feel that your touch is not about consumption but communion. Her breasts are not buttons, they're portals into her vulnerability, her passion, her pain, her power. And when you treat them with that level of respect and presence, you create space for her to rewrite whatever narratives may have been attached to them in the past. You give her a new experience of being touched, not with hunger alone, but with heart. She becomes more than a body to you, and you become more than a man to her. You become someone who sees, someone who listens, someone who connects. And in that connection, her breasts become not just sources of pleasure, but symbols of trust, desire, and erotic intimacy that transcends the physical and enters the realm of emotional awakening. Slow is not boring. It is the foundation of erotic tension, emotional presence, and sensory awakening, especially when it comes to touching a woman's breasts. In a culture that glorifies instant gratification and performance-driven intimacy, slowness becomes a radical act of desire, of presence, of reverence. When you take your time, you allow her body to speak its truth, to reveal itself, not in compliance but in unfolding. Slowness communicates that you are not in a hurry to reach a goal, that you are invested in every detail of her experience, in every breath, every pause, every shift in sensation. This kind of attention invites her out of her head and into her body, into the present moment where true arousal lives. It signals to her that you are not just trying to turn her on, you are savoring her, exploring her, creating a space where she can feel safe to let go. When you move slowly, every touch becomes more amplified, every caress more meaningful, because you're allowing time for her to feel, not just physically, but emotionally. The skin around her breast becomes more sensitive. The anticipation builds like a quiet fire, and the moment your fingers graze her softly becomes electric. Going slow lets you tune into her rhythm, hear her body's subtle responses. The inhale that quickens, the slight arch toward your hand, the way she melts into your chest or tilts her head back to feel more. You notice things that would otherwise be lost if you were rushing. The way the curve of her breast fits into your palm, the warmth of her skin, the rising heat between you. Your hands begin to move with intention, not routine. You trace the outline of her chest before moving to the center. You pause when her breath hitches. You stay longer when her body opens. This deliberate pacing gives her the space to be in her own pleasure, rather than trying to keep up with yours. It shows that you are not just touching her to get somewhere, but because you want to be exactly where you are, with her, on her, inside the moment. Slowness tells her she's not being rushed or used, but cherished and seen. It invites her to trust you, to allow you deeper access to her body, her mind, her desire. The more patience you show, the more her body responds, because slowness turns touch into language, and language into connection. Alas, slowness turns touch into connection. What you create when you move slowly is not just arousal, it's intimacy, depth, and a shared space where pleasure doesn't just happen, it expands. And that expansion, that gentle unfolding, is what makes her go wild. Not from force, not from urgency, but from the power of being taken somewhere soft, slow, and sacred, where her entire body becomes a canvas of sensation, and her breasts become a gateway into her erotic self. Unhurried and fully alive in your hands, to touch a woman's breasts in a way that truly awakens her, you must use your hands like they're listening, like they are attuned instruments, responding to every breath, every sigh, every subtle shift in her body. Most people touch to deliver a sensation, but the kind of touch that makes her melt is one that receives just as much as it gives. When your hands are listening, they are not forcing or performing, they are responding, adapting, flowing with her, not over her. This means that you are not locked into a technique or a routine. Instead, you are tuned in to the live feedback her body is offering. Her breath speeding up or slowing down, the tension in her muscles, the way her skin warms, the way she moves closer or further away. These are all cues, like a language without words, and when your hands are sensitive enough to listen, you adjust naturally and instinctively. You may find that a light graze is more powerful than firm pressure, or that lingering in one place can be more arousing than constant motion. The point isn't to do something but to feel your way through her body with presence and curiosity. Your fingers, palms, and even the backs of your hands become storytellers, narrating not just touch but connection, awareness, and care. Listening hands don't just seek a reaction, they create one through the quality of their attention. You might begin by simply placing your hand over her chest, feeling her heartbeat, letting her know that you're not there to take but to experience with her. From there, you follow her body like a map that's unfolding in real time, knowing that no two moments will ever feel the same. You touch the outer edges, the undercurve, the softness, not just the obvious points of arousal, because you understand that eroticism isn't always direct, it's often discovered through detours. You might feel her breath catch as your fingers draw slow circles, or sense her tension melt as your palm presses gently against her. That's when your hands become more than just extensions of your body, they become receivers of energy, emotion, and arousal. When she feels that kind of touch, one that listens rather than grabs, she relaxes into you. She opens, she trusts. Her body becomes more expressive, more responsive, because she knows you are paying attention not just to her pleasure, but to her person. And that attention is intoxicating. It heightens her senses, amplifies her desire, and creates a space where she feels held, seen, and understood. When you listen with your hands, you don't just stimulate her, you connect with her. And that connection is what takes her out of her head, into her body, and deeper into an erotic experience that is felt, not only on her skin, but in her entire being. It is in this kind of listening that she stops thinking and starts feeling, fully and wildly. Seduction thrives on anticipation, not assumption, because the most powerful arousal isn't born from certainty, it comes from curiosity, unpredictability, and the delicious unknown of being discovered again and again. When a man touches a woman's breasts with a sense of routine or entitlement, when he assumes he knows exactly what to do because it worked before, or on someone else, he steals the magic of presence and replaces it with mechanical repetition. But when he approaches her, like every moment is new, like her body is a mystery that changes with her mood, her energy, her day, then touch becomes an exploration, not a destination. This sense of anticipation is what awakens her erotic self, because it tells her she's not being touched for someone else's gratification, but because she is actively being felt, studied, craved in real time. The slow reach of your hand, the way you pose just above her skin, the moments you hover without grabbing, these create electric suspense in her body and mind. It allows her imagination to start playing, to lean into the moment with heightened awareness, to feel wanted before being touched. Her breath quickens not because of pressure but because of presence. Anticipation is foreplay that lives in the mind and the body at once, and it ignites every nerve ending with emotional readiness. When you make her feel like you're discovering her for the first time, she responds with the kind of wild, raw surrender that only true desire can unlock. You don't follow a script, you follow her signals. Maybe today she wants firm pressure, maybe tomorrow she wants feather-light strokes, maybe she doesn't even know what she wants until you give her permission to find out in your hands. That's what anticipation creates, a space where she doesn't have to perform or please, but instead gets to unravel, to explore her own body through the way you engage with it. There's a thrill in unpredictability, in wondering what you'll do next, in knowing that your touch is not just a routine path to arousal but a dance of attentive spontaneity. You're not just touching her, you're constantly adjusting, testing, teasing, and inviting her to reveal more of herself. That's where her wildness awakens, because it's not about intensity, or pressure, or speed. It's about depth, timing, and the courage to not know. Assumption dulls the senses because it reduces her to a pattern, but anticipation sharpens every edge of the experience because it honors her as a dynamic, evolving being. She doesn't want to be figured out and filed away, she wants to be re-experienced. Every time you touch her, and when you bring that kind of presence, when your hands hesitate just long enough to let her want build, when your lips trace her skin like it's unfamiliar terrain, when your energy says I want to feel you, not just use you, then she goes wild, Not because you reached her breasts, but because you reawakened her entire sense of being wanted in a way that feels alive, fresh, and utterly irresistible. Touching a woman's breasts to make her go wild is not about pressure, speed, or perfection. It's about presence, emotional attunement, and erotic intelligence. It's understanding that her body is not an object to be used but a world to be discovered, one gentle, curious, responsive moment at a time. Her arousal blooms when she feels seen, not judged, explored, not assumed, worshipped, not rushed. When your hands listen more than they act, when your touch builds anticipation rather than skipping to outcome, when you treat her not as a body to conquer but as a soul to meet through sensation, she opens in ways that are wild, uninhibited, and deeply connected. In that space, your touch becomes not just physical, it becomes emotional, psychological, and sacred. And that's where true erotic power lives.